guys! So we are back for chapter 5 in Esther. If you haven't watched the rest of the videos, make sure you watch those first. My daughter is having lunch literally right across from me, so if you hear little chatty babies, that is why. Okay, so let's just hop right in. Everything will be linked down below as usual, and we're gonna go to verse 5. Verse 5? Chapter 5, verse 1. On the third day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the palace, in front of the king's hall. The king was sitting on his royal throne in the hall, facing the entrance. When he saw Queen Esther standing in the court, he was pleased with her, and approached and touched the... Oh, I just skipped a line. He was pleased with her, and held out to her the gold scepter that was in his hand. So Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. Okay, so Esther goes to the king, even though she was not called, and this is just a beautiful reversal of Queen Vashti refusing to go to the king when he calls for her in the first chapter. So it's kind of a reversal there. And it says that the king favors Esther, pointing at God's hand and placing her in the right place at the right time again. This also refers back to Esther chapter 4, verse 11. When it kind of explains the tradition of the golden scepter. So even the queen couldn't just go and approach the king like that, but when he found favor, he held out the gold scepter, and basically that allows her to speak openly to him. So let's make a few notes here. Okay, then we jump to verse 3. Then the king asked, "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it will be given to you." "If it pleases the king," Esther replied, "let the king together with Haman come today to a banquet I have prepared for him." "Bring Haman at once," the king said, "so that we may do what Esther asks." So the king asked for her request, but she decided to delay time a little bit and to invite him to a banquet, which gives her a better setting for this discussion. She also invites Haman because she wants to confront him at dinner. And you have to kind of put yourself in Esther's shoes here with the fear that she probably felt in that moment. Esther just wants to win the king's confidence that her accusations will be taken seriously. And then we also have a related passage in here, which is Hebrews 4:14 through 16. I'll jump to that in just a moment. But basically, when we face challenges, it's important to remember that we can approach God's throne boldly. Without fear, he'll meet us with grace every time. So it's kind of the opposite of what the traditions are in this time period with this king. But we can go to God with anything. And that's kind of where Esther gets this boldness from, to just be able to approach the throne and make this request. So let's make some notes here, and then we'll jump to Hebrews 4:14. Okay, so now we're at Hebrews 4:14. "Therefore, since we have a great high priest who has ascended into heaven, Jesus the Son of God, let us hold firmly to the faith we profess. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weakness, but we have one who has been tempted in every way just as we are, yet he did not sin. Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need." So again, Esther, the book of Esther never mentions God, but in Hebrews 4:14, we can see where Esther is drawing her bravery from. And this all just points back to God's role in all of this. "As they were drinking wine, and the king asked Esther, 'Now what is your petition? It will be given to you. And what is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted.'" So really quick, so the king asks for her request again. But you have to note, up to half the kingdom is more of an expression than an offer. The point is that the king wants to please Esther, and that she has his attention. Again, she doesn't have as much power as you might think a queen does have, but he does respect her and he wants to please her. Esther replied, "My petition and my request is this. If the king regards me with his favor, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come tomorrow to the banquet I will prepare for them. Then I will answer the king's question." So for whatever reason, Esther delays this request one more day. This could be God's timing, it could be out of her fear, or it could be out of her wisdom. But the delay is going to allow us to see a little bit of Haman's story right after this feast. "Haman went out that day happy and in high spirits, but when he saw Mordecai at the king's gate and observed that he neither rose nor showed fear in his presence, he was filled with rage against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home, calling together his friends and his wife. So Haman has just been honored with the king and queen's presence. He has all of the power and money he could ever want, but he is still filled with anger by the actions of just one man disrespecting him. His insecurities just cannot be erased by his power, and they never will be. Again, God's hand is showing in the story that he is able to restrain himself by not acting out against Mordecai just yet. Haman boasted to them about his vast wealth, his many sons, and all the ways the king had honored him, and how he had elevated him above the other nobles and officials. And that's not all, Haman added. I'm the only person Queen Esther invited to accompany the king to the banquet she gave, and she has invited me along with the king tomorrow. But all of this gives me no satisfaction, as long as I see that Jew Mordecai sitting at the king's gate. So Haman basically goes home and brags about how perfect his life is. He reflects on all of his power and money. He acknowledges the honor of the feast that Esther has served with no idea what her intention is or what that will lead to. But Mordecai isn't the problem here. Haman's heart is. Nothing will ever satisfy Haman because he's always going to find something wrong with his life. No amount of money or power can ever fill him up because it's a God-shaped hole in his heart. And the smallest inconvenience is driving him insane. It's one guy, and still he's letting his entire life be ruined and is blaming Mordecai, which, again, is not the issue. His wife and all of his friends said to him, have a pole set up reaching to a height of 50 cubits, and ask the king in the morning to have Mordecai impaled on it. Then go with the king to the banquet and enjoy yourself. This suggestion delighted Haman, and he had the pole set up. Okay, so Haman wants Mordecai to not only be humiliated, but to suffer a horrific death, to be punished. It's not enough that all the Jews are to be killed anyway. Haman just wants to speed it up. He wants this final word, and that is one of the reasons that he ultimately leads to his downfall. So he builds the gallows, and this is to foreshadow what comes next. Also, depending on what verse you're reading, what version you're reading, we've talked about this before, but yours might say to be hung on the gallows. It might say to be impaled. Most likely at this time, someone, if they were going to be put to death like this, would be impaled. The idea here is that it's a really gruesome death. It's usually slow and very painful. So Haman doesn't just want Mordecai dead. He just wants him to suffer. And that just shows the length of his anger and how broken his heart is, that he wants someone to die because they aren't respecting him in the way that he wants. So let's make some notes and then we'll wrap this up. Okay, so that is it for chapter 5. Another really short chapter again. Next video, we're going to jump into 6, which is, again, another short chapter. All these are kind of happening very quickly, but it's all just setting up this plan that God has for his people. So if you want the notes, that will be linked down in the description box below. I don't write down every single note that I have, so if you want more details, then you can definitely get that. And there are a couple study questions as well if you want to dig further into this and just kind of think about it a little bit more. All right, you guys, thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys in the next video.